Well, good morning and welcome to our webcast this morning about how to resolve incidents faster using Slack. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. If you have questions, please ask them through the Q&A pod on your screen. We will answer as many as we can today, and we will follow up on any that we aren't able to answer during the session. Also, please check out the resources on your webinar console for additional content, and look for the recording from today's session in a follow-up email. I'll be your speaker today. My name is Brent Chapman. I am a staff engineer at Slack. I'm part of our Reliability Foundations team, and I focus on incident management. And we're very glad to have you as our guests today. Thank you for joining us. Here's a little bit more about my background, just so you know where I'm coming from. I've worked in Silicon Valley for my whole career, for everything from startups to giant enterprises like Xerox PARC and Google. I've worked as a sysadmin, network engineer, network architect, site reliability engineer, and SRE manager, and so forth. I also have my own consulting firm. I've written some widely used open source software, and I've co-authored one of the O'Reilly books, the Building Internet Firewalls book. Along the way, I've always done volunteer work in emergency services. I started off as a search and rescue pilot and incident commander with an organization called Civil Air Patrol, which is the civilian auxiliary of the U.S. Air Force. And I've been both a member and an instructor with community emergency response teams in various cities. For the past 10 years or so, though, most of my volunteer work has been with the Black Rock City Emergency Services Department. Black Rock City is the Burning Man event, the Burning Man Festival. Every year, except this year because it's canceled for this year, every year we create a temporary city of 75,000 people on a dry lake bed in the middle of the Nevada desert, 100 miles from the nearest major city. The Emergency Services Department provides fire, medical, and mental health services for Black Rock City. We essentially handle as many calls for service as any other 75,000 person city in Nevada does in a year. We just do all of ours within a 2-week period. So I've learned a lot from those experiences, and I hope that today we can learn from each other. And again, please feel free to ask questions through the web app, through the webinar today, and we have folks on hand who will help answer them, or we will get you answers afterwards. So what we're going to cover today is a quick introduction to Slack in case you're new to the product. We'll talk about why incident management matters and what it takes to be successful at it. We'll share some tips and best practices. We'll talk about how one of Slack's customers manages incident response. And again, we'll be happy to take questions. Let's start first with Slack and why team collaboration is so important. Slack is a channel-based messaging platform. It's the only channel-based messaging platform that is enterprise-grade at enterprise scale. Channels are an alternative to inboxes. Whereas inboxes put the individual first, channels put the organization first. The value of channels becomes even clearer when we talk about incident management. But the key thing to remember here is that the value of channels grows over time. You may start with messages between individuals and your immediate team, kind of a DM system. But because you have insight across your entire organization, it's easy to begin to engage company-wide. And then as you begin to share your channels and workspaces externally, say with partners and customers, that value continues to grow. The Slack platform is another critical part of how Slack works. This allows teams to integrate the existing software systems and workflows that are critical to their work, including incident response and reporting. The Slack platform integrates with over 2,000 tools that teams use daily in a wide variety of categories. Being able to use Slack as your sort of central nervous system reduces time-consuming mental context switching for your staff and leads to a more focused and better productivity among your staff. Plus, you can build your own integrations and your own applications within Slack, and most of our customers do. And we'll see some examples of that today. Your team likely has incident management workflows that would be less painful if they were automated. There are more than 800,000 active developers who develop apps for Slack, including internal teams building custom integrations to do things like incident response. All right, now let's dig into incident management. Incident management is critical to the success of any company in today's digital age. The cost of not getting incident management right is incredibly high, as you well know. Issues like server outages and broken code are so common that, according to a Splunk report, many companies experience about 5 incidents a month to the tune of more than $100,000 a pop. Annually, incidents cost enterprises $700 billion in lost productivity, according to research from PagerDuty. So that's why a solid incident management strategy is a must for any organization. So let's talk about the timeline for a typical incident. Basically, something occurs, a problem occurs. You detect that problem, you raise an alert about that problem, you respond to that alert. At some later time, you mitigate the problem, meaning that you make it go away from the user's point of view. And then at some time after that, you repair things. Now, from your customer's point of view, the problem runs from occurrence, if they're one of the affected customers, all the way through to mitigation, when you've made that problem go away from the customer's point of view. But from your company's point of view, the problem runs from alert. The problem doesn't really begin until you get an alert about it. You don't know that the problem is happening until you get an alert about it. Until you get that alert, you're not doing anything differently than you would be otherwise. Your engineers are writing code, reviewing code, sitting in meetings, attending training, or if it's after hours, they're at home with their families or whatever. But from the company's point of view, there's no change to the company's activities until that alert fires and they start to investigate. All right. So there's this mismatch between the customer's perspective on the incident and when it starts and the company's perspective. There's also a mismatch on the back end of the incident. From the customer's point of view, as soon as the problem is mitigated, the incident is over, right? But at that point, the company may still be responding to this as an emergency and, scrambling to complete repairs and a more permanent fix and so on. So, the emergency may go on for a fair amount of time outside the view of the customers. Now, these first few phases of occurrence, detection, alerting, response, those are where your monitoring and alerting systems operate. That's Splunk, that's PagerDuty, that's Grafana, that's Icinga, all sorts of different packages, all of which integrate with Slack, by the way. But that's where those things operate. And that's a very important set of tools, but it's not really what we're here today to focus on. What we're here today to focus on is what happens from the time you start responding until you repair things and are back to normal. That's the incident response phase. That's the incident management phase. And the reason that it's so important to focus on that phase is because if you do it well, you can bring in those mitigation and repair times. You can shorten the duration of the incident, both from the customer's point of view and from the company's point of view. And, reducing the duration and impact of the incident from the customer's point of view is obviously a good thing. Reducing the impact on the company is good as well. And I don't just mean impact on the company as a whole. It reduces the impact on the individuals within your company as well. Incidents are stressful. They are distracting. They are disruptive. They get in the way of whatever planned work and other activities you had. If they occur outside normal business hours and you have to page people to respond to them, it's very disruptive to personal health and welfare and family life and so forth. And so if we can reduce that impact, it's absolutely worth doing. So responding effectively to incident requires close coordination of efforts. You can't make the best decisions if people within your organization are pulling in different directions, or if they're not even seeing the same information, if they're not basing their activities and decisions on the same on the same information. This problem has been exacerbated by the shift to remote work that many companies have been undergoing over the last few months. Getting everybody onto the same page, getting everybody into the same room is a lot harder, now that everybody is remote. Just imagine trying to manage a crisis without having that essential context for your team and your shareholders, or your stakeholders, or without having an efficient way to build consensus among your responders, or without having the ability to align on future preventative measures. And it's good to remind ourselves that we aren't alone here. Technical teams today are under a lot of pressure. In the digital world that we live in, customer expectations are high, the organizations are complex, and the pace is faster than ever before. We're all trying to resolve incidents quickly, but that's not all that we do. So leaders in this space are focused on innovation while maintaining quality and team alignment and productivity. Now, let's talk about some tips and best practices that you can bring back to your team for handling incidents with Slack. It's important to think through your approach to channels. Channels are the heart of Slack, and it can help a lot, for example, to use a consistent naming convention for channels. Actually, even before that, it helps to use a channel per incident, and then have a consistent naming convention for those incidents, for those channels. That makes it a lot easier to find channels via Slack's quick switcher, or the Command K. Having a channel per incident means that you can collect the full history of an incident in one channel, in one place for everyone to see. That helps new responders come up to speed quickly during the response without having to interrupt people the way they would have to on a phone bridge or a Zoom call or something like that. And it also makes the post-incident review easier because, again, you've got all the information there in one place. You've got links to all of the graphs, screenshots of what people were seeing, discussions of what was happening at the time, decisions that were made, and so forth. It's all right there. And again, that's useful both during the incident, as new people join your incident and bring themselves up to speed without having to interrupt what's going on in the conversation that's taking place, and also useful in the post-incident review phases. Another idea is to use bots to help your teams work more effectively. Bots and automated processes can drive efficiencies. For example, as we'll discuss a little bit later, teams at Tyro, which is an Australian payment and banking company, rely on Slack automations to reach faster resolutions. Examples of how bots can help you include creating new channels and sharing them across workspaces. Again, using that consistent naming convention that you develop for your company. Inviting a preset user group to incident channels. So if you've got people that are going to be interested or are likely to be helpful as responders, being able to invite them as a group rather than having to remember to invite them one by one. Bot can do that for you. Posting a link full or a message full of links to quick references and so forth at the top of new incident channels. Setting channel topics to reflect current information about the incident. We'll show some more examples of that later. But these are all things that you can do by hand, but you can also have a bot do them for you. And having the bot do them for you means that they get done more consistently. Another action you can take is to set up a standby channel in advance of the next incident. You don't know what the next incident is going to be, but create a channel and have it ready just in case. That's a great place for people to gather when they're wondering whether something is an incident. That's often the case at the start of this. It's like, what are we seeing here? Do we smell smoke? What's going on? Is this a serious problem? Do we need to launch an incident response? Those things, those sorts of questions come up sometimes, and having a pre-established, pre-designated place to have those discussions is very useful. My general tip, by the way, is if somebody says, are we having an incident? The answer to that is almost always yes. You want to bias yourself towards launching an incident response and treating something as an incident. Another tool or technique that you can use is to create additional channels for complex responses. So if you have everything about an incident in one channel, sometimes one channel isn't enough for big, complicated incidents. For instance, there may need to be a separate discussion about a policy issue related to the incident among your exec team or something like that. Moving that to a separate channel, creating a separate channel for that, and moving that discussion to that channel helps keep the main channel focused on the problem at hand. Sometimes there's private information or confidential customer data that needs to be shared within an incident, but only certain people should have access to that. So establishing a parallel private channel with a more limited subscriber set can help you deal with those situations. Slack's ability to share messages between channels easily helps everybody who's operating in these different channels stay in sync, right? So critical messages from the main channel can be shared to these auxiliary channels. Critical discoveries and decisions from the auxiliary channels can be shared back to the main channel, right? And it just helps everybody stay in sync, to have these discussions organized this way. Here are some more tips and tricks that you can use to help your team thrive during incidents. Use your channel topic to show the current state of the incident. For instance, what the severity level of the incident is, who the incident commander is, maybe a sentence-long description of what the problem is that you're trying to solve. Use pinned posts for periodic status and plans updates within the channel. One of the things that we teach our responders at Slack is that when you join an incident channel for an incident in progress, the first thing you want to do is go look at the pinned posts. Those pinned posts will be the most recent status updates and what we call CAN reports. CAN is an acronym for conditions, actions, and needs. And it's just a report format that we use within an incident. You can use threads for deeper dives into particular topics. Threads are a particularly powerful feature of Slack. They allow you to have deep discussions on some particular issue without tying up the main channel, right? And as long as you stick to a convention that whatever key decisions or key discoveries that you make within a thread get shared back to the main channel, threads are incredibly useful. Slack also uses emojis to indicate various things, and all of the use of emojis is by convention. I mean, this looks like some, cute little toy thing, but really it's very powerful once you get used to it. For example, we use the little, there's an emoji that's a little red helmet with a white cross on it. We use that emoji as a status emoji for the incident commander. So that very quickly, at a glance in the channel, lets people know who the incident commander for this incident is. And when they say something in the channel, people see that little red helmet next to what's being said and say, oh, okay, this is a direction from the incident commander for this incident. I should pay special attention to it. We also use emojis as reactions to particular messages. These are called reactgees. And we have a set of conventions that have evolved over time within Slack as to what various reactgees mean. For example, we use the eyes emoji as a reaction to a message to mean, I'm looking at this. Yes, I've seen this request or I've seen this information and I'm looking into it. We use the green check mark emoji to mean this is done. So if the message in the channel is, so-and-so please restart server X, then so-and-so may first react to that message with eyes to say, yep, I've seen this, I'm looking into it. And then, 5 minutes later when it's done, they'll come back and react to that message with the green check mark to say, yep, this is done. And that just gives us a very lightweight, easy to follow convention for people to use, very lightweight. Another reactgee that we use that's kind of unique to incident management is the postbox emoji. A lot of times during incidents, things come up that are interesting discoveries, but not really relevant at the moment. But they're things that you want to follow up on later. They're things that you want to look into later. And so for those, we use the postbox reactgee. And then later we can search them and search for messages within the incident channel that have that reactgee attached to them. And that's our list of follow-up actions or a start of a list of follow-up actions. And we've got a variety of other React that we just evolve usage of that say agreement or doubt or puzzlement or whatever. And these are like slang within a company. Every company develops its own buzzwords and its own lingo, and every company that uses Slack develops its own culture around emojis and reactions and so forth. But again, very simple, but very powerful. All right, now let's talk about some insights from the customer I mentioned earlier, Tyro. Tyro is an Australian payments and banking company. They processed over $17.5 billion in transactions last year. And they use Slack for incident management, and they integrate Slack with some of our partners, such as PagerDuty and Zoom, just like we do. Australians' use of electronic and contactless payments continues to rise, and as more and more businesses trust Tyro, it's critical that the company's services are operational 24/7. So before Slack, Tyro's incident response team relied on in-person conversations and email in order to solve issues, which led to what one executive called a very strong interrupt culture, where people would basically just come up to talk to you. Okay? If people were not available at their desks, they'd fall back to using phones or email. But after hours, some folks might not check email. That's according to Tim Kirsten, Tyro's IT operations manager. According to Tim, it was much, much slower and much less effective than Slack. Here's what Tyro recently shared with Slack about where they are now. They're now using channels and automations to resolve incidents faster. They are simplifying routine processes with Slack. They are moving from a walk-up culture to Slack channels. They are building connections amongst their people with Slack channels, and they are seamlessly shifting to remote work in Slack. Again, quoting Tim, compared to email, Slack is an absolute no-brainer that has really changed the speed of response on the major incident team. Vodafone is another customer that uses Slack for resolving customer issues faster. For example, they use a combination of PagerDuty and Slack. And according to Paul White, their former head of systems engineering, before Slack, it would have taken 15 to 20 minutes to find the root cause of customer issues. But we've reduced that mean time to resolution to under 5 minutes, and it's been phenomenally successful in a short period of time. After switching to Slack, the telecom company dramatically reduced its time to resolution, in part because of Slack's PagerDuty integration, which engineers use to monitor and escalate customer-facing events. So now, when an incident occurs in a production environment, the integration notifies the right team down to the right individual who's on call within milliseconds. And all of this is visible within Slack. Before Slack, again, according to Paul, it would have taken them 15 to 20 minutes, and now they're down to under 5 minutes. So examples of how bots can help, again, creating new channels, inviting preset user groups to channels, sharing reminder information and quick reference information, and managing channel topics just so that everybody stays informed. Here are some parting thoughts. Basically, when an emergency is allowed to grow unchecked, it gets bigger and bigger. IT incidents, that's just the way they are, right? Very seldom do problems go away on their own. They get bigger and bigger. So when incidents take longer to resolve, the disruption from them grows exponentially, not just for your customers and your bottom line, but also for your hardworking engineering team. So, if you supplement your emergency plan with these best practices, you can quickly resume service and let more of your on-call engineers sleep peacefully through the night. And as one of those on-call engineers, I can tell you, we appreciate that. Thank you very much for attending today. Please bring these and other great capabilities back to your workspace. And if you want to learn more, use the link here to contact our sales organizations. And now I will answer a few questions. All right, our first question is, What is the Slack feature that you use most or see having the most impact during an incident? Well, I'll tell you, it's one that I mentioned already. It's having a channel for each incident, having a separate channel for each incident that we can focus everybody in, that has all of the information related to that incident, the history, and so forth. And the reason that is so powerful is if you consider the way, organizations that don't use text-based systems like chat operate for incidents, they typically do it on phone bridges or Zoom calls or something like that. And if you've been a part of those, you know how painful it is when you're in the middle of discussing something or debating something and boom, somebody else joins the call. And it's like everything pauses. Hi, who's this? Who just joined? And oh, it's Joe from the database team. Okay, well, hang on, Joe. And then Joe interrupts with, hey, tell what's going on? Tell me where we're at or what you need me to do. And you have to stop and, interrupt the discussion and the discovery and the troubleshooting in progress in order to bring that new person up to speed. And so that takes a couple of minutes. And then, okay, you go back to the discussion and then another person joins the call. And it's chaos, right? And all of that can be avoided when you're operating in Slack, in a Slack channel, because Joe from the database team can join the channel, can read the pinned posts that have current and recent key information in it, can read back through the channel. They can basically bring themselves up to speed. And when they're ready, then they can say in channel, without disrupting the work that's already in progress there, hey, I'm here, I'm up to date, tell me what you need me to do. Right. And that's just so much more efficient and effective and less chaotic and disruptive. So that's my favorite Slack feature when it comes to running incidents. It's just having a channel and using a channel instead of a voice bridge. Thanks for the question. Another question, a related question, is that posting every alert and every comment into one big channel can quickly become overwhelming. So I see the need for separate channels for specific responders and control over types of alerts and follow-up messages. How do you know, though, when you have too many channels? And a related question of how do you manage channel versus thread communications on your site? Well, let's come to that second part later. We tend to, first off, we have the attitude that channels are free, right? We make channels frequently. Anybody in Slack can make a channel. We have conventions around naming of those channels and what they're used for and so forth that are, well documented and well understood within Slack, and that helps, bring some order to the chaos. We have some channels are focused on a particular event or a particular situation, and the incident channels that we use, the channel that we use for each incident is a good example of that. Other channels are focused on particular teams, and they last forever, right? They last longer than any person on that team as people come and go from a given team over the years, right? Those channels live on themselves. Still other channels are kind of have a permanent, they're kind of like bulletin boards for particular topics, right? If you've got a message about a particular topic, you post it to that channel, or you post it somewhere else and you share it to that channel, because that's the other great thing with Slack is it's really easy to share messages between channels when that's an appropriate thing to do. So, for example, when you launch an incident and you create a channel for that particular incident with a unique name for that particular incident, you might also have an incidents channel that's nothing but a list of the incident channels that have been created, right? And if you're using a bot or an automation to create your incident channels, then one of the things you can have that bot do is, after it has created a new incident channel, post a one-line message to the all incidents channel just to say, hey, there's a new incident channel. Here's the name. Here's the one-line description of what's happening. And everybody can follow that all incidents channel. And if they are interested in that new incident, if it looks like it might be something relevant to them or to their team or to their customers or whatever, they are one click away from going over and looking at the incident channel for that particular incident. And if they see something there that they want to contribute to, or a comment that they want to make, they simply join that channel and make their comment. And if they see something there that they want to share back with their team, they're one click away from being able to share something from the incident channel back to their team, right? So it really is a powerful way of operating. So the related question was, how do you manage channels versus threads? How do you know when to just create a thread on an existing discussion and when to create a new channel? That's an interesting question. It's kind of just a convention or a cultural thing. It's like, it's kind of like being at a party. How do you know when it's appropriate to answer a question in a large group and just continue where you are versus grabbing one or two people and stepping aside to have a private conversation about it or something like that? It's a very similar thing. There are social conventions and so forth that develop around that. One of my rules of thumb personally is, if I see a thread getting to the point where it's got 50, 70, 100 replies in the thread, I start thinking, maybe this is a meaty enough topic that it's worth having a channel of its own or something like that. Because, threads are only one layer deep. You can only go one layer deep. You can't have threads on threads. So when we start wishing for threads on threads, that's a good sign. It's, time to spin up another channel for that. But again, that's by convention. It's the social convention that has developed within Slack. Other companies use the tool other ways, and the tool is very flexible. So, you can develop and follow your own social conventions within your use of Slack. Again, thank you for those questions. Next question is, what are some examples of deeper integrations or interactive buttons that I think are best practices or that I've seen customers use during incidents? Well, the example that I just gave about having a bot that will create your incident channel and do all of the startup things that you would otherwise have to do by hand. You create the channel, you share the channel to another workspace in our grid tool. You set the topic line of the channel to reflect who the current incident commander is, what the SEV level of the incident is. You post a message full of quick reference links to other documentation, to your incident checklists and your run books and things like that. You invite a certain user group of people to the channel that want to be involved in every incident, or at least be aware of every incident. All of those are things that you can automate with a bot, right? And having the bot do them so that your incident commander just says, set up a channel, runs one command, one / command that you've created that says, set up a channel. And all of these things go and happen and flow out from that. Very powerful. Means that your incident commander can, focus on the things that only a human can do, making sense of the situation, figuring out who else to page, figuring out what other resources you need for the problem, so on and so forth. We use integrations with Zoom, with PagerDuty all the time. We use integrations with Workday, for being able to look at our org chart, right? If I'm trying to get a hold of somebody and they're out on vacation, I need to know who their manager is. Slack, you may have seen in the news, we just acquired a company called Rimeto that does workplace directories and so forth. And we're starting to use that internally for that kind of, again, find me somebody on an appropriate team, find me where that team is within the broader organization, so on and so forth. So, Slack is kind of our central nervous system, and it's just an incredibly powerful way to operate. The last question I'll take for today is someone says, we're always looking to automate repetitive process. What are some of your general tips and tricks? Yeah, automation is fantastic. Highly recommend automation of repetitive processes. One of my favorite sayings, this is one of the lessons I really learned when I was at Google in the legendary site reliability engineering, SRE organization at Google. Humans are bad robots, right? Humans are great at a lot of things, but consistently doing a certain process the same way every time, humans just are bad at that, right? And so if you've got a process that is consistent, that you want to follow the same steps every time, build a robot to do it. Advantages of building a robot: one, they'll do it faster than any human can. Two, they will do it the same way every time. They will not skip steps. They will not do steps twice. They will do exactly what you tell them to. 3, you can evolve the robot. As you want your process to change, you just change the code in the bot. And, boom, you've got a new capability. You've changed how you do things versus having to do a whole training and communications push to get people to do things differently that they're used to doing, right? Slack has some very powerful tools for building bots and for simplifying simple automation and so forth. The very simplest we've got is something called Workflow Builder. That lets you just create some very simple, straightforward, drag and drop, no code automations and so forth. At the other extreme, you have full access to the Slack API. You can write your own programs in whatever language you want. Python, Ruby, Perl. So I'm kind of dating myself as a programmer. You can tell what languages, when I sort of came up as a programmer by the languages I choose to name. But anyway, whatever language you want, it's a web API. You can write programs in that that will integrate into Slack very easily. And there are pre-made integrations from a lot of customers, a lot of our partners. PagerDuty and Zoom, for example, I mentioned already. So just, lots of possibilities there. Lots of power. All right, I think that's about all we have time for today. We will be sending this slide deck out within the next 24 hours to everybody who attended today. So you will have access to all of the material here, as well as this last page of additional resources, which has links off to some additional information you may be interested in. In the slide deck you receive, you'll be able to follow any of those. Any questions that people have asked, we will get an answer to you, offline. And once again, thank you all for coming today. Appreciate your time. Good luck to everyone.